Every empire that has ever risen has eventually fallen. Every king who sat on a throne believed his power was permanent. Every ruler who commanded millions thought history would remember them as invincible. They were wrong. But here is what is fascinating. Before they fell, before the cracks appeared, before the people rose up or the walls came down, there were patterns, hidden patterns, patterns that history textbooks gloss over, that professors skip in lectures, that documentaries never quite explain. Today, we are going to talk about those patterns. We are going to talk about what power actually is, how it is really obtained, how it is maintained, and why it almost always corrupts, and what the few rare exceptions did differently. This is not a history lesson. This is a masterclass in reality. Here is the first thing history will not tell you about power. The most powerful person in the room is almost never the loudest one. Think about every powerful figure you have been taught to admire or fear. Napoleon, Caesar, Cleopatra, Alexander the Great. History shows you the crowns, the armies, the speeches, the grand gestures. What history does not show you is the back room, the whisper, the quiet decision made before dawn that changed the fate of millions. Real power operates in silence. The Roman Senate feared Julius Caesar, but do you know who Caesar feared? Cicero, a man with no army, no sword, just words, strategy, and an extraordinary understanding of how people think. The most dangerous person in any power structure is not the one holding the weapon. It is the one who decides who holds the weapon. This is the first hidden law of power. Visibility is not authority. The person everyone sees is often not the person everyone obeys. Learn to look behind the curtain, and you will begin to understand how the world actually works. History teaches you that power comes from conquest, from bloodlines, from wealth inherited at birth. And yes, sometimes it does. But that is the surface story. Here is what actually builds lasting power. Trust, architecture. The leaders who lasted, not just the ones who rose, but the ones who endured, built systems of trust so intricate, so deeply woven into the fabric of their society, that removing them felt like removing oxygen from the air. Augustus Caesar is a perfect example. After Julius Caesar was assassinated, Rome was in chaos. Augustus did not seize power by force alone. He gave Romans something they desperately needed: stability, order, a sense that tomorrow would be better than today. He built roads, he reformed the military, he made ordinary Romans feel seen, and in return, they gave him everything. This is the second hidden law of power. People do not surrender their loyalty to strength. They surrender their loyalty to the feeling of safety. If you can make people feel secure, protected, and valued, they will follow you into fire. Now contrast that with leaders who ruled purely through fear. They rose fast, they burned bright, and they collapsed the moment the fear lifted. Fear is a loan with an impossible interest rate. Trust is a compound investment. Here is something history dances around, but never fully says out loud. Power does not corrupt people. It reveals them. When someone gains power, the filters come off. The social pressures that kept certain behaviors in check begin to dissolve. The advisors who once challenged them start saying yes to everything. The consequences that once regulated their choices fade into the background. What you see in a powerful person after years of unchecked authority is not a new person. It is the truest version of who they always were. The Roman Emperor Caligula was reportedly a reasonable, promising young leader in his first few months. Then, the structure around him collapsed, the accountability disappeared, and the real Caligula emerged. History calls this madness. Psychology calls it disinhibition, the removal of external constraints that once shaped behavior. This is why the most dangerous question you can ask about any powerful person is not what have they done. The most dangerous question is, what would they do if there were absolutely no consequences? That answer tells you everything. And this is the third hidden law of power. Power does not change you. It amplifies you. If you are insecure, power makes you paranoid. If you are generous, power makes you transformative. The character you build before you have power is the character that will define what you do with it. This is perhaps the most underrated secret of power in all of human history. Whoever controls the story controls the world. Every power empire, every enduring ideology, every institution that has outlasted its founders, none of them survived on force alone. They shadows because they controlled the narrative. They choices with your heroic and what was treason, what was sacred and what was blasphemy, what counted as history and what was forgotten. The church in medieval Europe did not maintain power primarily through armies. It maintained power through the story of heaven and hell, of salvation and damnation, of divine right. The story was so powerful that kings themselves knelt before it. In the 20th century, governments on every side of the political spectrum invested massively, not just in weapons, but in propaganda, in media, in education systems that shaped how entire generations understood themselves and the world. This is not ancient history. This is today. The platforms you consume content on are not neutral. The algorithms that decide what you see are not random. The stories that trend are not accidents. Information architecture is power architecture. This is the fourth hidden law of power. Control the story, and you control the reality people live inside. If you want to understand who holds power in any society, do not look at who holds the most money. Look at who holds the permission to define what is true. Now here is where it gets extraordinary. Throughout all of recorded history, amid all the betrayal, the corruption, the abuse, the manipulation, there are rare, remarkable exceptions. Leaders who gained enormous power and chose to use it to elevate rather than dominate. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man on earth during his reign as Roman emperor. He had every resource, every luxury, every instrument of control at his disposal. And he spent his personal journal writing about humility, about self-discipline, about his own failures, and what he owed to humanity. He did not write those journals for the public. They were private. That is how you know they were real. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison and emerged not with vengeance, but with a vision so generous it disarmed an entire nation on the edge of civil war. What did these people have in common? They had a why that was bigger than themselves. Power was not their destination, it was their tool. And tools, in the hands of someone with genuine purpose, build rather than destroy. This is the fifth and final hidden law of power. Power without purpose is a fire without a hearth. It burns everything around it until there is nothing left. But power anchored to something greater than the self, that is the kind that leaves a legacy history actually celebrates. So what does all of this mean for you? You may not be an emperor. You may not command armies or control nations.
but you exercise power every single day. In your home, in your workplace, in your community, in the way you speak to people who have less influence than you, in the way you respond when no one is watching. The hidden lessons of history are not just stories about kings and wars and empires. They are mirrors. They are showing you the patterns that repeat across time so that you can choose differently, so that you can build trust instead of fear, amplify your best self instead of your worst, tell truthful stories instead of convenient ones, and anchor whatever influence you carry to a purpose that outlives you. History will not tell you these things, but now you know. If this made you think, made you question, made you see something differently, that is the point. Share this. Let someone else see what history tried to hide, and we will see you in the next one.